Welcome to the Office Latte Podcast, where we go beyond the boardroom to explore new conversations on life and career. I'm Erin Kennedy, CEO of Professional Resume Services and wife, mother, sister, daughter, aunt, and friend. Now, let's dive in. Good morning, Summer. How are you?
Good morning, Erin. How are you doing?
I am fabulous. It's morning your time. It's more closer to afternoon my time. Now, since you live three whole time zones away from me. But anyways, I am so excited about our guest today. She is going to speak on one of my favorite topics. I'm so passionate about this, and I love that we have somebody in our industry who specializes in this, because most of the time every time when she puts a post out there, I'm like, yes, that. It's Colleen Paulson. She has a website called Ageless Careers, and she talks about ageism, and I just love it because she puts it out there, and she is specifically regarding Gen X and baby boomer. And despite what you may think, I'm actually in the Gen X era.
Shocking. I would have assumed maybe millennial, low millennial.
But anyways, so, that's something that just has always bothered me is, how people that are older in their 50s, 60s, and 70s. I mean, I had a guy come to us a couple of weeks ago who's 72. And he's like, you know what? I feel 55 and I want to keep working. I don't want to sit on the couch. I live in a condo. I don't have hobbies and grass to take care of. I want to work. And I said, I totally get it. I always say I'm never going to retire because I'll just end up sitting on the couch and watching Netflix. I don't know. But anyways, so Colleen is amazing. And, she's going to talk with us about how clients, over the age of 40 and 50 can really use that to better their careers and kind of dispel any myths that we hear about, ageism.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good topic to discuss just the different layers of it because there's ageism at every age, but especially
really, that's true.
People, and especially for older people within certain industries nowadays. So I think it's a good topic, and I'm excited that you guys are going to be doing a Q&A, because I think hearing from our audience, seeing what they have to say and ask about, she gets great advice. So I'm pumped for that.
She does. And for our listeners, any questions that you may have about anything, it could be interviewing, resumes, age, work and family, feel free to shoot us an email, officelattepodcast@gmail.com. So without further ado, let's welcome Colleen. Hi, Colleen. I am so glad to have you here today.
Yeah, thanks so much for the invite. I'm super excited.
We've been following each other, I think, for a couple of years. And, and what you focus on is one of my personal, favorites, just because I've always felt so strongly about, I feel like, people are put out to pasture, and by their 40s or 50s. And I always think, oh my gosh, but that's when they accumulate the most experience and so I'm curious. I know that you, in reading your bio, you've had some interesting, you started off, not in resume writing, but more, as an engineer and a production manager. So how did you, give us a little bit of your background and then how you ended up writing and why you made this kind of your niche?
So yeah, my undergrad's mechanical engineering, and I worked for Procter & Gamble for 5 years and really liked the business parts of my job best. So I went back to school, got my MBA, worked in pricing for FedEx, and then I had my first daughter almost 19 years ago. And I really just felt the need to be flexible. I felt like that was what I wanted to do. Yeah. And at that time, 20 years ago, the flexibility thing wasn't as big. Although they were letting some folks go part-time, they decided to discontinue it. And I quit with no plan, which I wouldn't necessarily recommend. If I had been smart, we tell our clients, have a plan.
Have a plan. Yeah.
And maybe learning the hard way, a plan would have been great. But I started freelancing. And so I started freelance writing. I was a contributor for the Motley Fool. And then I saw this job posting for resume writer. And I'm like, who would have thought that people actually that's something you can do, right? Like when you're in high
Right.
school or college, like no one talks
Yeah.
about the coaching piece. And so I started writing about 17 years ago and have kind of done different things through the years, but yeah, so 17 years later, and a lot of us start off writing for other people. I wrote for
Yeah.
other people through the years, and have been on my own for many years now.
Yeah. So you subcontracted for a while too?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Same with me. Yeah. I did a few years of subcontracting, and it certainly teaches you a lot.
Yeah,
Yeah.
without a doubt. Without a
Yeah.
doubt.
So how did this become was it a personal reason, or was it one of those things where you just kind of fell into this being your niche?
So I turned 50 this year. So I'm definitely getting to that point where, I see my friends and, who've worked so hard in their career. But I have one particular client who was in her 60s, and, we were doing the intake call and we're talking, and she only has, like through the year 2000 on her resume. And I'm like, well, what were you doing for the year 2000? I'm just curious. And
Yeah.
she's like, oh, I was managing like these huge teams at GE and, like a $45 million budget.
Wow.
And I'm like, so why isn't this on your resume? And she's like, well, they told me they don't want me to look old. And I'm like, there's always a place for something like that.
Yeah.
And so from there, honestly, I started posting about it on LinkedIn, and it was, I knew it was a problem, but then people just started coming out, and it's amazing how widespread it is, and no one wants to talk about it, but I know you see the same thing where these super competent folks who have done, really everything right, devoted their careers to these companies only to be told, we don't need you anymore.
I know. It just drives me crazy. It really does. I know. Especially, and to me, I always think they're at this age where they, can definitely fix any problem that a company has, and that they can, they're the ones that can do it because they've been through this. So why wouldn't you? To me, they're just,
it's short-sighted is what it is. It's,
yeah.
and, I get it. Like, as we go forth in our careers, we're making more money. So it looks easy, but it's just so short-sighted. It makes no sense.
Yeah. Yeah, it doesn't. I mean, I totally agree. And so you've been kind of focusing on ageism for probably the past, 3 or 4 years or longer?
They probably really focused the past probably 2.
Oh, 2. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I love your name, Ageless Careers. That's just perfect. And I know it is just funny. I always, when I see your stuff, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's my whole generation, Gen X, used to be the younger one. And now it's, we just are just getting older. But, so, I have a few questions. And so what are, the most common signs of ageism in the job search process, and, that you see, and how can older job seekers address this?
So, one of the common things that folks talk about is overqualified, right? And it can, and so the overqualified thing is so hard because sometimes it can just be code, right? Like, for ageism, sometimes, where folks get frustrated is, let's say you were a VP, right? And like, just because you're a VP, that doesn't mean you don't have to work anymore. If you're,
Right.
Most of us don't have pension plans. If we're Gen Xers, we don't we're our pension plan.
Yes.
So and a lot of us, I did a survey this year, and it's something like 80% of folks plan to work into their 60s and beyond. So we're going to be working. So sometimes, if you're applying for VP roles, okay, fine. Then maybe you shouldn't be applying for director roles. They're afraid you're going to leave. And I get that. So that's a place where folks get really stuck. It's like, well, I could do that job in my sleep. I totally get it. But you're going to have to kind of flip it a little bit in your head, so that's a piece of it. I'm finding a lot of folks just don't even know how to interview anymore, where they'll say things like, even come out and ask like how old you are, or how long do you plan to work, or
Yeah.
you'll have like a tech recruiter ask you on the sly, or tell you like, yeah, we want young people. Like it's it's amazing how open people are about that bias, and just like think
Yeah.
nothing of it.
Yeah. And I just put it out there. Just put it out
Exactly. Like, can you imagine? Like, it's
No, I know. You know, so when you were talking about interviewing, I mean, and this is part of what you do as well. What do you tell older workers about interviewing and red flags and certain things not to say? And, yeah, I mean, do you have any, tips or advice for?
Well, it's hard for a lot of reasons right now. So like when we started out, it was a given you wore a suit, right? Like, I mean, and you wore a nice suit. I mean, in fact,
Right.
they went as far as telling us like navy blue or bust. Like that's what it
Oh
was.
yeah. Yeah.
Green
Yeah.
was too much. Like for
Right.
a woman, like to wear like something like red, forget it.
Yeah.
So, just plain neutral. That was what we were taught. It was a form of respect. I had a client who's in his 50s and he's in the creative field, and he was down to the last two candidates, and they were like, yeah, you wore a suit to the interview, kind of came off as stodgy. We went younger.
Oh my
And
gosh.
now he had heard that from like in the company. So we're talking, he's like, what do you think? And I'm like, I've been starting discussions on LinkedIn, and especially in tech or creative, the guidance, what we learned starting out doesn't necessarily hold anymore. So,
Yeah.
for me, like depending on the role, the company, the industry, you got to do a little bit of homework now and see what the trend is. It doesn't feel fair, but part of, kind of being savvy right now, I mean, unfortunately, this is a challenging market, and you can say, and it's easy for me to say, well, you don't want to work with these folks anyways, because sometimes I will tell my clients when they have a particularly bad interaction, it's like, listen, these aren't your people,
Yeah.
But that's easy for me to say when you've been
Right.
unemployed for 12 months.
Right.
So being realistic, you're going to have to do some homework, and that means, if you're interviewing and you're virtually interviewing, make sure that you understand the technology. Be comfortable. You don't want to go in and not be ready for that.
Yeah. And know the culture. Like you said, you don't want to look stodgy and wear a 3-piece suit. Like my dad did, you want to dress the part of the culture. So if it's, if it's khakis and a polo or whatever, then that's what you should really wear to fit in.
Right.
That is such good advice, because I never would have thought that about the clothing, or about that making the difference. But it really does say you haven't done your homework. You don't know what our company culture is and how, you would stick out like a sore thumb. So that makes a lot of sense. Wow.
Yeah. And you know what? Even 5 or 10 years ago, I think the advice would have been different. I think things have changed so much, with COVID and virtual interviewing, where now it is a different world. And we all, part of, we have to show we can adjust to it. Right. And so we can't be so stuck on, okay, back in 1996, we wore blue suits and we got to stick with it. It's like, we're going to have to adjust.
Yes, exactly. So how would you, I want to kind of move to resumes a little bit. So how would you tell an older candidate to craft their resumes to highlight their experience and kind of not hide the age, but minimize the age factor?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I mean, number one, get rid of that year of graduation, get rid of it on LinkedIn, get rid of it on the resume. And I know they can like kind of find out how old you are, but I had a client who was in his 60s and he had on, they graduated in 1979. And I'm like, it even caused me pause. Like it just, you got to understand these folks might not have been born then. And it's just going to put preconceptions in their head. It's not fair. I'm not saying it's fair, but you just got to play.
Yeah.
for me, if you have relevant older experience, you can find a way to weave it, but not take up too much room. So put that note at the end, name drop. And this is really for candidates of all ages. You want to share your impacts. So, it's not enough. And I think, with AI right now, we're seeing so much talk, and I'll have folks come to me and they're like, well, I'm trying to use AI. And they think that using AI is going to make it like seem more modern,
Right.
But it's taking all, like it's not. You can use it for idea generation, and and they can definitely help you to kind of think about things in a different way.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, there's a human reading it, and so you need to write for them. So you got to use, think about what that reader is looking for, and then make sure that you're addressing that.
Yeah, and addressing that pain point and showing how you did it. I mean, I know sometimes we'll get clients that will have, as far as talking about dates and stuff, have some really good stories, but it might have been 25 years ago. And they're like, how can I bring this up? It's so relevant to this job that I want right now, whatever it is. And so what do you say for somebody like that when they have like these good nuggets or like a great story or great experience, but it was 20, 25 years ago? What do you recommend for that? I mean, I know different things we do, but I want to hear what you guys do.
I'm okay with weaving that into your executive summary, and especially if it's relevant. I think it's okay. And you don't have to say the years that it happened, but you can share, the insights that you gained from it, and it's part of your story. I think what folks, when you knock off those early years of experience just completely, sometimes it doesn't help you to tell your story in a real way. So, and that's where, I'm sure you see the same thing. It's like case by case basis. What works for someone isn't going to work for someone else. So in that case, I would definitely put that in their summary, and I would make sure to, add that in at the end of the resume as part of like additional experience. We have all sorts of different tricks we can use. Yeah.
Early career summary or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. But it's all the same thing.
Yeah.
And then on LinkedIn, I might like share that in the about section, but I might not share it in the experience section with years, just depending on where the client is, again, case by case basis.
Yeah. And I know, okay, so speaking of like LinkedIn, which does have certain like rules and guidelines you have to follow with years and things like that, ATS, some ATS, you have to put in the years. I think probably most, there's like 300 plus different software program, ATS software programs, but I know some of them, or most of them, you have to put the ages in, and so, or the years. So that kind of stinks, but, what do you recommend for that when you have to put the dates in? It's like,
so, I go back and forth, right? I mean, at the end of the day, some folks will say to me even, listen, when I go into the interview, they're going to know that I'm not 40 years old, they're going to have it, they'll be able to guess. And so, you don't want to lie, right?
Yeah.
And so, you can kind of, it gets tricky, right? So at the end of the day, if it's really, really relevant, and put the years, and if you don't get it, like there's not a lot you can do.
Right.
It doesn't feel fair, so you're gonna do the best you can with it, and then kind of go from there.
Hope for the best. Yeah. I know. And sometimes you just really can't do anything. Sometimes you're stuck within these perimeters, and I don't know, in that case, like I always tell clients, I know you want this company, but if they're super adamant about the dates and they want to know, then just put it out there and let them know. And if it's, hate to be all whimsical, but if it's meant to be, it'll be,
No, I feel the same way. I do.
Yeah. There's only so much that you can do. Okay. What about what do you recommend clients when they say, like you were saying in some tech companies, they say, how old are you? What do you recommend for people during the interview, and they can tell that the recruiter is kind of trying to figure out how old they are? I mean, I'm sure on the application, if they're filling out an application, it's going to, I mean, most companies, you still have to fill one out. It's going to say your age. But, um, when you do hear of some recruiters, because I've heard some stories too, like, oh yeah, so when you, and when did you go to, UCLA? I went there too. Or what, trying to kind of get the age out of them. So how do you recommend that the job seeker kind of get around that?
Yeah, so that's another great question. I mean, and I've had clients do this in different ways. I mean, some folks will just answer straight up, "Hey, I graduated in,
Yeah.
1979," and just put it
Yeah.
out there and leave it be. Some folks will tell you, you straight up just say, "Hey, that's against the law," and sometimes
Good.
when you're in that,
They should.
and sometimes when you're in that situation, it's just best, if the conversation goes on, you have to remember too, you're interviewing them. And so if it goes that far off the rails that you start to feel uncomfortable, I mean, sometimes, listen, I mean, for me, I get how in a natural conversation, it's easy to ask, "Oh, hey, I went to Stanford. What year did you graduate?"
Yeah.
And maybe not necessarily meaning anything of it. Right. And so, that's one thing. But if you feel like going off the rails, maybe you just kind of step back, do the best you can, and say, "These are not my people, and I do not want to work with them." Because I think we forget sometimes that there are a lot of red flags that come up.
Yeah.
So we have to pay attention. But again, I know that's easy for me to say in a market that is very challenging.
I hear this a lot. Common misconceptions, we both hear this. They don't understand technology. They don't understand, how we do things now, mainly technology. They're not with it, and I was telling, Summer this before, you and I hopped on the call, but, the one thing I tell my husband, and he's older than me. But I always say we need to stay on top of these things. We need to stay on top of the technology. He's like, "Why do I have to be on Snapchat?" And I'm like, because our kids, who are like late teens, early 20s, this is how they communicate. So you need to stay on top of this. You don't want to fall behind, so how can a person, I mean, in an interview, they're not going to be like, "Yeah, I'm on Snap with my kids." But I mean, how can they?
No, that's a great point.
I mean, how can they convey that? Yes, I know this stuff. I'm on TikTok. I'm on Snap. I always say to my kids, I'm like, you have to tell me the new and the upcoming stuff so that how do they get that point across? Maybe using their kids as an example, or
maybe even talking through, like when they're on a team project and, calling out, how they're collaborating with people of all ages. Maybe.
Oh, that's a great idea.
And, before we got on, I was talking to Summer too about, ageism is a funny thing. And so I've seen all these articles about Gen Z not being prepared to work. And
right.
I'm like, so I have Gen Z kids,
mm-hmm.
and I think your kids are Gen Z. If they're not prepared, then we need to step back as a society and say, where have we done them wrong? And I'm serious about that. So this is, listen, I mean, part of, kind of getting away from the stereotype is saying, "Hey, I get it."
Yeah. That's true. Putting it out there.
To get through it. And that kind of is your example. I don't have a problem going into the interview and saying, "Hey, I'm on Snap."
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of okay with that.
Yeah. I just had a flash. Did you see the movie The Intern with Robert De Niro?
I did, yes.
Oh, wasn't it? That's like one of my all-time, top 20 favorite movies. I just love that. But I thought I was thinking about interviews and he didn't really understand the tech when he was there in the beginning. But luckily he had these great kids around him that helped him. But I just showing that he's adaptable. So how can an older job seeker convey? So let's say they don't know Snap or they don't know whatever TikTok. How can they convey that they're adaptable and they're comfortable in learning? Like in the movie, he was kind of like, I don't know everything, but I'm willing to learn and I can catch on quick. So how can a job seeker convey that? I mean, in the interview and
Also, you can take classes.
Yeah.
And so,
That's a good point. Yep.
and so list those out on your resume. Like, hey, I'm constantly learning. And so,
Yeah.
I'm learning about this technology,
Right.
staying up to date on what the
Yeah.
trends are.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
even, it could be something as simple as saying, hey, during COVID, I figured out how to work from home
Yeah.
and, managed a team in a virtual environment, which is a really tough skill, right?
Yeah.
So, think through how you've had to adapt in the past, right? Like, and then give real examples of how you've done that. And
Yeah.
then
I love that.
like,
Yeah.
connect the dots, spell it out. Like, hey, I am adaptable and here's how I've done it.
Yes. Yeah. I love that. Those are great ideas too, because just letting them know, I might not have this experience, but I can definitely learn it quickly. Because I think that's another thing is that, I think some companies think that they can't learn it. It's not that they can't. It may just take a little bit. Are there certain industries that you see or your clients see that are more, or, let's say more geared towards ageism? I mean, I know we would always think tech, but what about, I would think like finance is okay with ageism, or, certain industries. I mean, the only one that really comes to mind for me is tech, but it could be
Tech,
wrong.
as far as roles go, marketing right now, I'm finding marketing, communications, because there's a
It's all
lot of
digital.
change right now, about what that's going to look like. And so, folks will say to me, well, I haven't necessarily done digital marketing, and so like trying to get up to speed with that stuff. But I mean, tech, like they'll just come out and tell you, like they just, I think, so that's, but marketing for me right now is a place where I'm seeing it take folks way too long to land. It's just, for whatever reason, experience isn't being viewed that favorably.
Yeah. Well, that's too bad. And what role does networking play? For older job seekers, how can they leverage their professional connections effectively? I mean, I always, to me, it's like the number one way, but, what do you recommend as far as networking and, new people, or maybe, LinkedIn is just like a giant, supermarket of everybody. So, would you recommend that they reach out to younger people or just people in their network, or?
I would say a combination, so I have, one executive that I've been working with, and he just, reaches out to folks that he hasn't talked to in a while. And and he has it on a calendar for himself. And he did that before he needed a job, right? Like that's just,
that's so smart.
Best practice. And so it's like, you don't want to be the person who just comes by when they need something. You want to be the person who reaches out to folks all the time. And I get like, we're all so busy. It's super hard. But he, when he had lost his job, he had this routine in place where like coffee chats, just a quick email just to see how people were doing. And so that helped a lot. I think we make networking out to be something really difficult when it's literally like you're at your kid's soccer game and you're talking with people. So, are you going to find a job through that? I don't know, but that isn't even like your goal is just to connect with people and, and make it easy for yourself,
right.
In a real way.
I want to hop real quick to resumes. Something that I had taken some notes and I wanted to ask you about certain keywords and certain words. We all are like, don't use the word seasoned. Don't use seasoned. That's like a giant, I'm old.
It is.
It is. So okay. Can you give me a few terms that you would definitely take out, like seasoned? And then some that you would maybe replace with it?
Yeah. So objective statement, if you still have the words objective statement,
oh my gosh,
get rid of that. One like kind of subtle one is mobile or cell, because, back in the day, we would probably put like a landline or office line and then mobile or cell, but it's just a given today that that's your cell. So, like you don't need to call
That's
it
true.
out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Although I do still have a landline. I have a business.
I do too, Erin. We talked about this on LinkedIn.
I know. I still do because I'm in such a rural area. I mean, I need one. Yeah.
Well, and I kind of use it as backup, just
Yeah.
in case something does go wrong. Because as
Yep.
business owners, like we kind of need
Mhm.
backup, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I get it. Back in the day, we had references available on request.
Oh,
Please
stop with that. I know. That's just, it's a filler. I think it's just a filler. People don't know really what else to put, so they just add that.
What if you had it on like back in the 90s? That was kind of the way things were. Like today, it just shows you're not up to date.
Right. Exactly. So, that's like a giant red flag. Just, yeah.
Right.
Okay. One thing I wanted to do is, we have an email, Office Latte Podcast at gmail.com. And so sometimes we get questions from clients or from job seekers. So I wanted to do a Q&A with you and I, some of them that I got. So I'm going to read a couple of them that I thought were good. And then we can answer. You can answer.
Awesome.
Okay. This reminds me of Dear Abby, the way some of them like put their little, thing at the end. This one is frustrating. Okay, I'll read it to you in a second. Okay, I'm a 52-year-old professional with over 25 years of experience in my field. Hold on, I'm going to move this right here. Hopefully you can't see this on your screen. And I've been applying for jobs that perfectly match my skill set. Despite my qualifications and a solid work history, I'm not even getting called in for interviews. I'm starting to wonder if my age is holding me back. I make sure to focus on my achievements and keep my resume up to date, but I'm still being overlooked. Could my age be a factor? And if so, how can I overcome this barrier and prove that I'm just as capable as younger candidates? Signed, frustrated, but experienced.
Yeah. No, I mean, we hear from folks like this all the time. I'm sure you do too.
We kind of just covered that, as far as 25 years of experience and could my age be a factor?
I mean, when applying online, you don't know, right?
Right.
Like, so if applying online is the only thing you're doing, then no matter what your age is, you're kind of limiting yourself. You've got to be networking. You've got to make sure that LinkedIn profile is up to date and optimized so you're easily found.
Yeah.
So, it's not just as simple as, is my age coming into play? I mean, it could be, right? Like we've talked through it. Ageism is a real thing, but you've got to do all the things to find a job today. You really
do. You do. And you have to not just focus on one thing. You have to focus on a lot of different job search. Okay. Here's another one. And, we just talked about this. I'll just read it anyways, but we did just talk about it. I'm in my mid-50s and have been struggling to land interviews despite having a wealth of experience. Lately, I've noticed many companies are specifically asking for dates of employment and graduation on resumes. I'm concerned that including these dates might reveal my age and lead to being overlooked. I don't want to seem dishonest, but I also don't want to lose opportunities due to my age. What's the best way to handle this situation? Should I include the dates or find a way to present my experience without drawing attention to how long I've been in the workforce? Signed, concerned about age.
Yeah.
Well, concerned, we did cover this, but yeah. So
I mean, you don't want to lie, right? So I mean, that's the biggest thing is like you don't want to lie.
Yeah.
If I mean, add the dates if you feel like it's relevant. If you want to leave it off, you can, but at the end of the day, you don't want to lie. So that's.
No, I know. You just don't. You don't, because they will find out and then it's just going to be worse off for you. Okay. Last one. I'm in my late 50s and have been noticing a shift in how my younger colleagues perceive me at work. Despite being highly skilled and adaptable, I often sense that they assume I'm not up to date with technology or current trends simply because of my age. They tend to offer unsolicited help on tasks I'm fully capable of doing and sometimes exclude me from discussions about new tech or industry developments. That stinks. It's starting to affect my confidence in my relationships at work. How can I address these ageist assumptions and prove that I'm just as capable of keeping up with modern tools and issues as they are? Signed, feeling underestimated.
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough one. It feels like it's
Yeah.
a cultural thing in this case where maybe you're not at the right place for you. Like,
I was just going to say, maybe the
isn't
company
that
is.
horrible? Yeah, that's how I feel too. Like,
Mhm.
again, in this market, I wouldn't quit my job without a backup, but I'd probably start looking
Yeah.
because a good company culture is not going to let that fly. They're just not.
Right. Yeah. And they're they're not going to let that happen, and they're going to help you versus,
Making you
kind of
feel
make
like
you
that.
feel, yeah, yeah. Well, so I guess underestimated that you should maybe start looking.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, this has been great talking with you, Colleen. Couple of things. First, how can people get a hold of you? How can people find you?
You can find me on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to connect with folks. You can also, if you'd like, you can email me. It's pretty easy. Just Colleen@agelesscareers.com.
Great. And they can go to your website and check out what you offer. If you have any, different packages, or I was going to say any launches or anything. It's agelesscareers.com.
Yeah.
So we don't like to leave without asking our guests that one awkward question. No, but so tell us something about yourself that you're passionate about, or maybe a hobby or something that you do that people wouldn't guess about you.
Yeah, so I am very involved with our community pool. About 7 years ago, it almost like literally went bankrupt, and so
You
that's
said the
really
community pool.
yeah, yeah. So we
Oh,
can. It's kind of old school. Like the kids can actually, my kids can walk to the pool, and I know
aw. Are you in a rural area, or are you in like
I'm
a?
not. I'm in the
Oh, okay.
suburbs of Pittsburgh, so
Oh, okay.
yeah, and especially like I grew up walking to the pool because I grew up in the city, but in the suburbs, most of the time, like the kids have to be driven everywhere. So one of the
Yeah.
great things about our pool is that it's walkable. Like, where there's sidewalks, it's very walkable. And just with where our community was, we weren't able to support the pool anymore. And so that kind of became my passion project is like I have 4 kids
Yeah.
and I'm like we got to do something. So 7 years later, it's all doing great, but that's like my little like it's my unpaid hobby, but it's
Aw. So
awesome.
what do you do? I mean, what do you do? I mean, is
I'm
it
on the
just like,
board. We, basically our only employees are the guards, right? So like it's all neighborhood run, and so
aw,
we
that is awesome.
yeah, it's a lot of, it's a lot of fun. I've met a lot of great people, and so that's one thing I do recommend for folks is like, if you're not sure, like get involved with some kind of volunteer
Community
group,
stuff. Yeah.
nonprofit, something, and then call it community leadership on your resume because that's what it
Hmm.
is. You're
It
helping
is.
your community. So
Yeah. Yeah. I love
that's my
that.
passion project.
I love that. So are you at the pool like every day in the summer?
I try my best. I
Yeah.
do. I try to
Yeah.
like schedule my meetings around. I still have a 10-year-old, so like she's not at the point where she can go by herself. So
Right. Right.
and my 2 oldest were guards this summer. My next one will be guarding next year. So
Aw.
it's a
Now,
lot
how
of
old
fun.
is your one that's, how old is your third?
My third is 14. So I
14.
have
Okay. So he's
I have
or they're at the age where they can, okay, guard.
yeah.
Aw, how fun. That is I was just thinking what a great family, thing to be passionate about as well.
Yeah,
That's
it is.
nice.
It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. And especially, I was going to say in the afternoon in the summer, I'm in Michigan. So when we do get our sunny days, I pretty much will cut out a couple of hours, just to enjoy the sun and
It's
be
the same
outside.
here in
That's cool.
Pittsburgh.
Hmm.
That's what Summer and I were talking about too. Like October 1st, I'm sure it feels the same way in Michigan. It's like that dark, rainy season.
Oh, yeah.
It's
It is so dark now. It's so dark. I love it in June and July. It's light till like 10, and now it's getting dark by like 7. Oh,
I know. We're there.
I know. I know. Well, this has just been so much fun having you, Colleen. And you can get a hold of Colleen, agelesscareers.com, and hopefully we'll talk with you again soon.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Erin.
Thank you. Thanks again for listening to the Office Latte Podcast. You can find us anywhere you listen to your podcast. You can follow the podcast on Instagram and TikTok at Executive Resumes. or subscribe to our YouTube channel, Office Latte Podcast. If you have any career questions or conversations you want us to talk about, send them to officelattepodcast@gmail.com and we'll answer them in an upcoming show. Have a great week and stay caffeinated.